Saying very warm welcome to all of you to this session. I'm Helen from Kindling Trust and Kindling Farm. I'm going to be chairing the session, and the session is this the second coming for the Veg Box Schemes and other ethical food retailers? And I'll be introducing the speakers in a little while. Before I do, my internet connection's a little bit unstable. Have you lost me? Am I back?
All good.
Back, okay. Sorry about that. I'll switch off my camera at some point once I've stopped this bit. But yeah, before we start, just to do a bit of housekeeping, because to let you know, the session's been recorded. We're keeping the cameras off just so that it doesn't interfere with the recording, and also keeping you on mute for now. If you could keep yourselves on mute, that would be great. And also not to disturb the speakers mid-flow, which they will be soon. What we will do, we're going to do 10 minutes each, personal, just under 10 minutes, and then right at the end we'll have all the questions, but we absolutely promise that we'll give over half the session to questions. And before we start, we've also got a Mentimeter link in the chat. Basically there's 3 questions in there, and it's just for us to find a little bit about who's in the room, so what your interest is in this subject in terms of whether you're a box scheme or want to start up a box scheme, and also a little bit about your experience of what's happened with sales or customers over the last 6 months or 2 years. So if you could answer that would be great. And then also all of the questions are going to go through the Mentimeter at the end, and that just really helps us to kind of manage the Q&A, and it also, I think, means that you can vote on the questions, which is very exciting. And I will just be, when we get to the questions, I'll just be reading those out, but do feel free to flag up if I've misrepresented your question. And I think I'm just going to quickly introduce who we've got on our amazing panel that is going to help us answer this question. We've got Singh-Watson, who is Rivet Organics. He will introduce himself, but has a national veg box scheme. We've got next Dan Monks, who is from Unicorn Grocery up here in Manchester. And we've got next Andy Johnson, who's working with Food Exeter to build a new food system in Exeter. So that's great. So very excited. And I think I'm actually going to pass on to you, Guy, and then I will say what's come out of the Mentimeter survey later on. So over to you. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Thanks, Helen, and welcome everyone. Yes, so I started growing vegetables 35 years ago and founded Riverford, the box scheme, which is now kind of 98% of sales, and then it sold it to the staff, now co-owners, 3 years ago. So, I mean, not everything I say is the view of Riverford. I guess they're going to be sort of personal views, but I thought I would start by just, well, actually, I'll start by saying that about 2 years ago, I had the misfortune of going to Amsterdam. I've paid a lot of money to speak at the World Retail Conference, which was an absolutely hideous event. But I was preceded on the stage by Stuart Rose, ex-head of M&S, wasn't it? I think so. Anyway, he was always known as being the good man of retail and an honest and decent person. And anyway, his mantra, which he just said over and over again for about half an hour, was that more or less that the customer's always right. Retailers, all you got to do is give them what they want, whatever product they want, whatever service they want, even whatever price they want. That's all. You are just completely at the behest of your customers, which I have to say I utterly disagree with. I don't think customers often know what they want. They're often pig ignorant about how it's produced and the impact of how it's produced, and actually would really appreciate a bit of guidance on that. Now, that may sound arrogant, and it's definitely a dangerous position to have as a retailer, but it is the position that Riverford has largely been based on. So I love veg boxes. I know more about growing vegetables than almost any of my customers, and I know about their environmental and social impact. And I even go as far as to say I know what they should be eating at a particular time of year. That may be going a little bit too far. But So I love Veg Box Schemes, and I really do hope that there is the second coming. So I'm just going to give you some figures really describing, Riverford pre-COVID, during COVID, and too early to say post-COVID, but where we are now. And so we were turning over about 75 million at the doorstep. Pre-COVID, it went up to about 112 million, so that's 50% increase during COVID, and it has stayed more or less there. So I think there is possibly a marginal decline, but only a few percent, less than 5%. It's quite difficult to unravel the effect of Christmas and everything. And but yeah, in total sales, we seem to be holding quite well. I'll be interested to hear from this survey, which I hope many of you will fill in, how that compares to other people. Perhaps more interestingly, in terms of the number of, box schemes, boxes as opposed, because we also sell over the last, 15 years, we have sold an ever-increasing range of extras, as we call it, so people can build their own box or add things to a box. And until COVID, that was definitely the direction of travel. It seemed to be what people wanted, so that would support Stuart Rose's hypothesis on retail. And pre-COVID, for each delivery we made, we only sold 0.8 of a box. So roughly 80% of people were buying a fruit or a veg box. Very occasionally, someone would buy both. During COVID, actually, it went up to 1.3. Well, that's hardly surprising because we stopped selling anything else. So it's always dangerous to equate sales with demand, I think, because sales are a function of demand and availability, and there was no availability of anything else. So very weird time. So it went up to 1.3. And sure enough, since then, we were pre-COVID, we had about 300 different lines, different things we sold, including meat and actually, no, I think they excluded the meat, but including dairy and lots of different fruits and vegetables. So yeah, it went up to 1.3 boxes per delivery, and it's now come down to about 1 or marginally below 1. And the pattern before COVID hit was that box sales per order, so that 0.8, 80% was declining by 3% a year, fairly relentlessly, and there just seemed to be nothing we could do to stop that. And so, obviously I didn't like that very much, and I did even lead me to wonder, were box schemes gonna, and us included, gonna die a slow, lingering and painful death? COVID has given me, more hope, because it's fairly static at that 1 to 0.95 boxes per order, and we have introduced more extras now, so nothing like what we did do. I think they're about 50 or something. But you can still build your order if you want, but there does seem to be some evidence of a change, that people are more willing to accept their choice being edited, which I think is what a veg box scheme is, probably the ultimate in choice editing. But I think I think there is some evidence to support that people are willing to accept more editing. Can't understand my writing here. Just a few other little statistics. I mean, retention is really good. It was struggling a little bit pre-COVID. Obviously, during COVID, people were desperate to get whatever they wanted. I said our sales rose 50%. They could have been rose 150%, if we'd had the staff to pack the orders and the vegetables to sell. But retention actually post-COVID is really good. The sort of level of interest, I'm told this by what we call our face-to-face sales team, is they think is as strong as it's ever been. And they're being fairly successful converting that into sales. I have to say the problem, we are not recruiting as many new customers as we would like, but that is a result of the greed of Facebook and Amazon, and the cost of bidding for words and whatever has, I think, pretty much doubled since pre-COVID, and it's becoming prohibitively expensive for our business model anyway. I mean, clearly there are people out there bidding for and I think I might leave it there, Helen. People, I'm happy to go into anything people want to know about Riverford. We're pretty open with our information and so on. I mean, perhaps I could say that we are, we were making reasonable levels of profit prior to COVID, somewhere between 2 and 5% on sales. COVID, I feel a bit embarrassed saying this because it's been such a miserable time for so many businesses, but I mean, it was, if you don't have to pay anything to get new customers, you restrict people's choice, you just do what you're good at, it's pretty easy to make money. And indeed, we did make a lot of money. And as a result of paying our staff more, paying our growers more, and investing more in the future. Sales will not be as good this year. Profits will not be as good this year, but they're still going to be pretty respectable. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I'm actually just getting some of the figures through here. So we've got 6 who run a box scheme. Oh, can you hear me all right? 6 who run a box scheme or work for a box scheme, 3 growers or producers for a box scheme, 1 who wants to start running a box scheme, and 6 box scheme customers, and a producer for another outlet, and then 5 other. And I'm going to come back to the sales. We've got stabilised at 35%. I'll come back to that once I understand it more. And I think in the meantime, hand over to Dan, if that's okay.
Hello, everybody. My name's Dan. I'm a fruit and veg buyer at Unicorn. Unicorn is an independent supermarket in Manchester. It was founded in 1996. We just celebrated our 25th birthday in the summer. There are 69 member directors currently and a pool of about 10 casual workers at the moment. We focus our offer on, ingredients first and foremost. So fresh, wholesome, quality produce is kind of the core of what we're trying to offer. Where possible, we try and buy direct from suppliers, mostly in bulk if we can. With minimal handling, and our sourcing is based on very clear nutritional and ethical criteria, which actually in terms of limiting our choice is actually really helpful. I think a lot of people think we would be feel restricted by it, but actually I think the reality is it works very the opposite way. We aim every day to be competitive with supermarkets in our pricing. It's probably the biggest challenge, and I'd say also probably the most exciting thing that we're trying to do. And a kind of general point of view, we're a very friendly, approachable, optimistic place to shop. We want our customers to feel really kind of excited to be shopping there and good about the world, and certainly never intimidated or judged by their shopping choices. So Unicorn is a worker co-op, which in very simple terms means it's run entirely by the workers. We have no board, no bosses, and no management structure. Each member director, we call ourselves member directors, we can't really decide which one. We all have an equal share in the business, an equal say in the decision making, and we all get paid exactly the same hourly wage. All the decisions that we make, and this is really crucial to how we see the business in a kind of bigger picture, is based on longevity. So we really want Unicorn to outlive all of us. We want it to be around for, millennia, I guess, is the... and without sounding kind of evangelical, although we are a bit evangelical, we really believe that worker co-ops offer a really amazing alternative to employment than kind of conventionally run businesses. Certainly from experience, I can say they result in a more motivated workforce. We're pretty passionate, and we're also driven by quite similar shared values, which again, in a workplace is quite a useful thing. But not only ourselves benefit from it, certainly our suppliers seem to like us very much, and our customers as well. So it's really is about building a sort of community of all of the people involved. And the great thing about worker co-ops is that no single person will ever be able to profit off the success of it. So redistribution is at the core of the model. Even if we wanted to shut up shop and liquidate all of our assets. It would have to go back into a worker co-op fund worldwide. We could never take any money out of it individually. So organic fruit and veg is at the absolute heart of what we do. And more than that, supporting organic agriculture is really fundamental to what we're trying to achieve. So we have spent many years cultivating, well, what we hope are supportive relationships with our growers. We're on the phone to them every day. It's a very involved process. We also offer support in terms of grants and donations. We have a growers fund which is linked to our sales, which we have a kind of ring-fence pot of money that we keep aside each year. And far from kind of notions of charity or goodwill, it's more an understanding that we can't continue to grow if our growers aren't able to sort of come along with us. Yeah, our offer is very heavily focused on what we can get locally. There's a few market gardens that have sprung up around Unicorn and since it's been established. And we follow a European season with the exception of some tropical fruits. So we follow the season north, and if there's ever anything available in the UK, we'd always privilege that supply above one that we could import. Yeah, so we buy as much as we can direct from the farm gate. So we have a direct relationship with about 22 growers at the moment. I think the reason our growers like us so much is we pay our invoices promptly. Sometimes we even pay them on the day that we get the goods. And yeah, that's very, very important to the kind of trust that we've managed to build up with them. Yeah, and at the heart, we're trying to present a viable alternative to shopping in one of the multiple supermarkets and demystify an understanding of organic food and who it's for. We're really trying not to be a luxury shop or appeal to just a wealthy market. We want this to be for the masses and for everybody. So in terms of the last 18 months and what shifted, so we had an enormous uplift in customer numbers in the panic buying weeks. I'm sure everyone will remember. We saw a huge surge in sales and customers. It was actually quite unpleasant to be working during that time. And then immediately following that, in the announcement of the first lockdown, we did see quite a big drop off in customer numbers. But luckily, or rather not, well, luckily or not, we have definitely recovered some of those. And we're pretty much back to trading sort of on a par with 2019 sales. I would say that the most positive shift that I've observed in this period has been a broadening of the kind of conversation around where our food comes from and who grows it. Previous to COVID, it felt like it was quite an insular conversation that, you know, people like myself or sort of people in this industry were really passionate about, but it didn't really reach the everyman on the street. Whereas I think COVID really triggered that sort of questioning, and I think that was a really good thing to have come out of the last few months. So from the perspective of a bricks-based shop, which is sort of yeah, I guess what I want to give, we think that there will always be space for people to come and look at the produce, and people will always want to kind of smell and touch and squeeze, and also at Unicorn we feel it's being part of the wider community as well, kind of to come to the physical space. But that's not to say that we don't think there's room for, you know, many more people doing the same thing that we're doing. Like, I think a lot of frustration is often channeled at us of like, why aren't there more unicorns? We want there to be a unicorn in every town. And you know, simply put, we're already working as hard as we can to keep this one going. And what we really want to see is other people replicating the model. And if that's in, you know, the values and the principles can apply either to a shop or to a box scheme or to anything that's supporting the organic movement in the UK. So yeah, I'd say that. And the most important lesson that we learned during COVID was that customer trust is the thing that matters more than anything. And I think if you have that, then you're onto a winner, really. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Brilliant, thanks, Dan. There's lots of, just to say to everyone, there's lots of great questions starting to flow in, which we will come back to at the end. And a quick, I think I'm understanding, before we go into Andy, understanding a little bit more about the Mentimeter results. And that, what we've got a few mixed to questions 2 and 3, the sales uplift, they do seem to have gone up mostly, apart from one answer. So some have gone up by 35%, some by 85%. This is over the last 24 months. So the highest was 85%, which is interesting. And with the level of customer retention, there seems to be quite a mixed views on that, from terrible to good sales retention, to a slight drop. There you go, Andy. On that note, I will hand over to you for you to chat, and then we will come back to the questions. Do keep questions flowing, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Helen. So I'm Andy Johnson. I'm based down in Devon. I was a farmer for a while. Now I'm an independent advisor, and I did work for 8 years for Guy at Riverford. We started out with 3,000 boxes a week. I think when I came down in '99, it struggled to get above 4 for a year. I think it took about a year to get past the 4. And then we made a positive decision that we were going to stop supplying supermarkets and concentrate on the veg boxes. And by the time I left in 2007, we were doing 15,000 a week. And I'd started out as the packhouse manager, coming from a conventional background. I'd been using chemicals, and so if you want to know what I did, growing iceberg for McDonald's would be one of the things I did for my sins. And just as I was leaving, we started to use a thing called gaucho, which kept aphids away for weeks and weeks on lettuce, and no one knew how. And then we discovered that they were neonics and they were bad. And I was really pleased I'd left, actually, and came down to Devon. And I came down as packhouse manager, and pretty soon I made my way out to the fields to link the fields with the packhouse, which is a really vital job, as there was no one doing it. So I filled the hole, of giving the packhouse an idea what's coming in, because the idea of a seasonal veg box is great, but the packhouse didn't actually know what was coming in from the fields. So and then stayed doing that, working on the planning for 12-month a year production, and then left the business to take up my own little business with my then wife, of organic eggs for the local market. And we were able to turn over something like £300,000 from 18 acres, and we didn't actually need 18 acres. If you work really hard and you don't take any money from the business, you can be quite profitable, or you can certainly make a living from a small area of land. And then since divorce, I'm now independently consulting, and one of my customers is a food charity in Exeter, and I'll come on to that in a minute. In terms of the box schemes, organic sales I think around 1.7% of organic of all food and drink in the grocery market is organic in the UK, and the best figure I can come up with is that box schemes account for about 15 to 18% of that. But they do for that, they actually do quite a lot of heavy lifting. A lot of the campaigning about organic comes from the box schemes. It doesn't come from the supermarkets, who, are responsible for 75, 80%. And they're often the first point of call for customers when they decide to try organic food properly for the first time. They try a veg box, and it's quite a challenge for them to accept living with the seasons. If they've got a garden, and we saw garden sales of seeds went up dramatically during the lockdown. The box scheme doesn't always complement their garden output, because their surplus corresponds with the box scheme surplus sometimes. And it's really good to hear from the survey there that people, numbers have stayed up, because finding those customers, as Guy said, finding them for free or almost for free, and then being able to keep them is a real win-win. And I looked at some figures. Food Foundation did a report in May last year looking at the first 6 weeks of COVID, and they thought sales went up nationwide to 580,000. That's 110% increase from a regular 276,000 a week. And they could have hit 850,000 a week if the capacity had been there, the vegetables, the people. But I'm still, one of my customers supplies a big box scheme, and the way that Riverford reacted and the way the other ones reacted on the Sunday afternoon, really, just before lockdown happened, they had to decide whether they're going to carry on in business or not. And they switched to just veg boxes, cut the extras, both at the same time, both of the big box schemes. And while we were all locked away in our homes, they had to go to work and do the risk. And, you know, retail was one of the highest sort of easiest ways of catching COVID. And, you know, hats off to the box schemes, because they did really respond well. And where are we now? So the return to retail and return to supermarkets has happened. So that's helped Unicorn's sales. That's great. How long the supermarkets keep supporting home delivery, I don't know, but we've all got a lot more used to home delivery. It's doubled in value, I think. And, you know, it costs the supermarkets a lot of money to run home delivery service, but they are certainly committed to it. The vegetable seed sales that I can see have stayed up, which means people are sticking with growing their own food. And the other thing is, it's never been easier to start a box scheme from scratch. If you've got some land, if you want to grow organic vegetables, there's some great affordable and integrated IT solutions now. People understand the word sustainable a bit more. Short chains mean something. And home delivery, as I say, is much more normal. But meanwhile, retail, it goes even more crazy. And that rapid grocery, this thing of having an app on your phone, and within 10 minutes, you can have an emergency pineapple or bar of chocolate delivered to your door. These businesses are attracting the senseless money out of the city. So what, you know, box schemes are there. They you know, against that, they look quite sedate, I feel, but they are catering to a different market. And while retail goes bonkers, the question that we started with, you know, what are the revolutions or the revolution that's needed? For me, number one is localizing production, the distribution and the selling of organic food right the way across the country, using co-ops, community interest companies, farmers, growers, new entrants, the established brands that deliver value and the values. So that, again, it's you know, the value of thrift, that we're not charging a huge amount of money for this stuff. There's foods for everybody. We're hopeful, cooperative, we're kind, supportive, and we know what we're talking about, we're certain. Using multi-channel delivery network. So that's a combination of retail shelves, farmers markets, box schemes, home delivery, takeaways, getting into that market, vending machines on street corners or on farm entrances, food service, public procurement, and any others that we can think of. And then 4 is work with others to identify policy changes that are needed to allow the business to thrive. So that's working with local councils to try and get local food to have its place. And with a project with Food Exeter, we're, you know, we sat down about 18 months ago and said, you know, there is a local food supply into Exeter. There's 2 or 3 good box schemes. There's a couple of retailers selling local food. Our aim was to set up something quite big, and we christened it the little of organic for Exeter. So reasonable value, not a huge range, and food for everybody, to capture 15 to 20% of the food and drink market in the city and around the city, 35 kilometre supply base and distribution. Right. And that requires about 2,500 hectares converted to organic. It's a £60 million retail spend. And the plan is to start in 2023 and over 8 or 10 years to grow to 20% of the market. So it's ambitious, and scale is will deliver us the values and the value that we want to make this food for everybody, not just the well-informed and the wealthy. And that's what we're doing.
Well, that's amazing. I want to move to Exeter. But I won't, I promise. I'll stay in Manchester and we'll set up Kindling Farm. So that's that. Thank you all for that. That was amazing. We've got lots of questions coming in about various different things, some decision-making questions that I'll come to, but I think what I'll do is I'll start at the top. So we've got a few for Guy. But feel free, if the rest of you have thoughts or are relevant to you, do feel free to come in on those. So Guy, how do you balance your desire to grow and bring more great produce to more people versus not dominating the box scheme market because your offering is so easy and broad compared to some other smaller local businesses? Unmute.
There we go. I'm muted now, but I'm not sure if I've got the answer to that one, really. It's, I think personally, I feel that I am not prepared to compromise on values at all to drive growth. In fact, you know, as the years have gone by, I think I've probably become a bit more sort of hard line on that. But having said that, it's not my, you know, I still own 23% of the shares, but, you know, the co-owners own the rest. And they listen to my views less and less as every day that goes by, I think, really, which is how it should be. So, you know, those are the kind of question mark that we constantly get faced with, you know, how do you adopt a more flexible offer? And there's been a lot of discussion around flexible delivery days, you know, in order to appeal to more people. And I think it's the road to ruin. I don't think we need that growth. You know, we've had a very healthy growth. I think it was Dan who said just how, you know, it was really quite unpleasant growing at that pace during COVID. And I think everyone's felt that, and you know, stressful, and it's not really. And if I go back to the noughties when we were growing out, sorry, 2003, 4, 5, the time around when Andy probably very wisely left, it was a pretty miserable place to work. You know, everyone thought we were great and we were growing like crazy, but the reality of it inside is that it was people were stressed out, the management systems hadn't been developed to. This is probably a rather long-winded answer. I've probably said enough to answer the question, have I? I'm a bit ambivalent about it, but I do feel very strongly that, you know, we should just stick to what we do and do it well and tailor the business to be whatever size that delivers, really. So, but having said that, you know, I'm very, very pissed off with the rest of the world and I want to change it. And if trying to change it in a bigger way does that, then I want to do that as well. And I think there's absolutely a place for small box schemes who can deliver something quite different to us. And, you know, and my advice to them is, you know, don't try and be like us and we won't try and be like you, and we'll coexist very happily.
Great. Again, for you, there's a question about the 3% year-on-year drop pre-COVID.
Yeah.
One question about that is, was that a choice, a lifestyle choice? I think that's related to that. And the other question is, can we speculate more on why?
Okay, just to be clear about that, and to anyone who joined after I said that, the number of people placing an order that actually ordered a veg box was slowly declining by about 3% a year, and had gone from, you know, 100% in when Andy was with us, around about 2000 down to 80%, and it just seemed absolutely relentless. It was going down, you know, more and more. And it could be that was partly because we were offering, you know, more extras and doing a better job of the extras. But that's the way it was going, and it seemed unstoppable. And sorry, Helen, can you remind me the second bit of the question? So what was that a choice? Was that
can you speculate why the drop was happening? Do you think it was lifestyle choice?
Well, I think it was absolutely throughout my entire adult life, it's all been about, you know, consumer empowerment. If you've got money in your pocket, you can have exactly what you want, where you want, when you want it. So I think that was just a reflection of that, actually. And in many ways, even I remember going back to 93, I think we delivered our first veg box, and, you know, I was just copying the Tim and Jan Deane up the road. And I thought it was a crazy idea, actually. They really persuaded me to set up as a competitor. Yeah, I thought it was the most ridiculous idea. All the doorstep delivery was stopping. It was all about, you know, huge supermarkets, out of downtown supermarkets where you could go and choose between 30,000 different items and so on. So it seemed to fly in the face of everything. But there we go. They were right and I was wrong. There is clearly a place for it. Was it a choice to... No, I don't think it was. No, I mean, I think we were driven by demand rather than the sales being driven by our actions. And there's absolutely no doubt that we have diluted profitability by adding choice. And the extreme end of that is if you go to a supermarket, I read an article in the Financial Times pre-COVID, but the average loss on sales from a supermarket ordered on the internet was 14%. That was 2 years ago. The average loss on sales, Farmer Drop, who just collapsed, was 100%. The average loss on sales for Farm Drop 2 years ago was 200%. Lost £2 for every pound that they spent with them. You know, making money out of delivering stuff to people's door and making money out of giving people choice is really, really difficult. And you know, and I guess it's partly the ethics wanting me to stick with veg boxes. It's partly, I just think it's going to be damn hard making money out of competing with Ocado, really. I mean, Ocado have never made any money. I mean, they lost shed loads of money, unbelievable amounts of money. They may just about be trading in profit now, but I mean that, you know, countless millions, probably billions have been, you know, pissed away. And they, you know, now they've decided that they're a kind of solutions provision company as opposed to a retailer. But anyway, I've probably said enough on that.
No, I'm just going to stop you there because I would like to ask Dan if she, although now Dan's just quickly having a sip of tea, what if you want to comment on that, just from, because well,
well, I mean, it's not an easy one to answer, but definitely a view that we've encountered in local businesses around the Northwest. A few have said to us privately that it would actually be very difficult to establish something similar to Unicorn because Unicorn has such an enormous reach, and we have people willing to drive from very far, you know, far away, but also on a question of scale, because we're able to buy now in pretty decent quantities, we're able to pass that saving on. So that's how we're able to price so competitively. So it would be very difficult to compete with us in the market. And yeah, it's uncomfortable and I don't really know what the answer is. But no, we certainly wouldn't want to discourage or and we have a scheme, Grow a Grocery, which Debbie in our education and marketing team wrote, which is a guide for anyone wanting to start their own shop in the same model as Unicorn. You know, we support anyone who's interested in doing this, and we really are trying to kind of promote it as widely as possible. But ultimately, we're in a very strong position now because of the size that we are, and that gives us a not insignificant amount of security and buying power and all of the things that come with scale.
But I think you're also it's a really hopeful example, isn't it? Because talking about Guy saying that even Ocado doesn't, you know, make a profit. Like Unicorn makes money give us grants.
Yeah. I heard once that Aldi sells all of its fruit and veg at a loss because it knows that people go for the middle aisle and that's where it makes all its money from. And, you know, it's just not a viable option for us. We have to cover the cost of our wages in the food that we sell. I've just seen in the chat saying the answer to the supply problem for new unicorns is to create a cooperative wholesale society, which, yes, I mean, that is actually one of my bigger ambitions is to move into a more wholesale model in the future. I do think that would be a good solution.
So interestingly, there is another, I don't know, Andy, if you've got a comment to make on those, but there is, on what we were just talking about, there's also another question that says, is it true that Riverford is moving towards growing wholesale, for wholesale to supply other box schemes rather than grow your own boxes? Maybe you three should all get together and set up.
No, we don't. I'm kind of interested in the wholesale, but I think they're quite, and we do, actually, we kind of inherited our wholesale business from a company in the Midlands that we bought when their box scheme ceased trading, and rather reluctantly, the wholesale came with it. And it's been a very good example. Actually, we just left them to get on with it, and they've done a fantastic job of it, actually. So it's got, we just left people with a minimum of management interference, but with a bit of support and a bit of investment when they've needed it. And they've done very well. And then we have a wholesaling business from Devon, but I don't think we don't have any huge ambitions to grow that. No, I think there's a lot to be said in running a business and just focusing on what you do best and sticking to that. And that's pretty much the plan.
And Andy, did you want to come in on any of those points?
Well, really, I mean, the Rivet Wholesale is still going. I think I met the manager the other night, and she's £6 million a year they turn over, which is it's insignificant compared to the box scheme, but it's, as a wholesaler, it's quite big. As a local wholesaler, and you do supply local box schemes. Most of them have given up growing carrots and potatoes and heavy roots, and they buy them from Riverford when they need them in the winter, and it's quite a valuable service that you provide on the back.
I'm probably sounding incredibly blasé. I mean, we have a really good team who run it now, and we just need them to get on with it, and they do a great job. When it was run and it's on a separate site, when it was run as part of the box scheme and it got second picking sort of thing, we did a lousy job of it, and we had a lot of very pissed off customers. In fact, I offered to give the business to someone if he'd buy the next drink in the pub one night, because I was so fed up with some people coming and telling me how crap it was. And it's not, I want to do things well. And at that time, we were not doing wholesale well. I think we do it much, much better now. So probably that was a bit of a historical perspective that I gave on it. But it's still, we still don't have any ambitions to really go big on it or anything.
But it's the moving, if you're buying a truckload of citrus out of Spain, the price you're buying those pallets of stuff for is that's what we could grow the business if we could buy local organic businesses could grow.
Certainly true. It's also true that you get better quality because the truck comes straight from Andalusia to you, and it doesn't go and sit in a wholesalers for half a week while they decide what they're going to do with it, and then probably they sell you last week's anyway because they want to get rid of that first. So you get much better quality. You can buy from the growers that you feel confident working with from an ethical perspective. And, it is just a much better way of managing the supply than working through wholesalers, which is always going to be a bit unsatisfactory, I think.
Just related to this discussion, there's a question here. It says Guy and Dan, but again, I think, but Andy, you will have thoughts on it. Is there a scale above which you won't go? And would you ever think about radical marketing idea of referring potential customers to other ethical retailers who need new customers?
No, there isn't. There's not any finite scale. No. I mean, inevitably we have some impact on smaller box schemes. But I'll go back to what I said earlier, that the secret is not to be like us, to focus on freshness and a personal service, and we'll probably be more seasonal than Riverford, I would say. Whatever it is that you think you can do really well, then really lead on that, not trying to offer the range that we offer. But I go back to the thing. No, there is no upper limit, because I think the most of farming and food retailing leaves a hell of a lot to be desired, and I think we offer something better. So provided we can maintain our values, and I think being employee owned and becoming a B Corp and so on, all give us much more confidence that they will continue after I'm gone. With that proviso, I mean, if what we've done is good, more must be better.
I'm going to come back to I'm going to come back to decision making in a sec. I just want to know, Dan, what do you have a?
Well, we've had a second shop in the pipeline. It's been on the kind of back burner in the projects for probably about a decade, I think. And the reason it's never come about, well, there are several, but I think the big one is it would be so difficult to manage two sites with our current structure. I mean, wouldn't make sense to have certain functions like HR and payroll across two sites, but then because all decision making is devolved to the individual autonomous groups, I don't know how they would function. And I think it's kind of a conundrum that we've never really got beyond. So I would say the scale above which we won't go is most likely a second shop. I think we look at more, how can we grow in terms of community wealth building, you know, more of a focus on social issues and things. And in terms of recommending other like-minded businesses, I think that's something that we do really proudly and really frequently. We have absolutely, I mean, it's one of the nice things about working in a co-op is that certainly with other co-ops, it doesn't feel like competition at all. It's all about building the movement. It's all about more people having access to it. So anyone that's wanting to organise in this way, we see as a friend, and yeah, we'd like to promote the work that they're doing as much as possible.
When I was looking at the structure for Riverford, whether it became employee owned, I actually went and volunteered and worked at the Unicorn for a week. I just think it's the most brilliant business, and I hold my hands up in. I just don't. I think you're absolutely right to stick to one. And as a matter of fact, one of the other people I went to see who had run a bread making co-op in Northampton. Anyway, he said the co-ops really didn't work well, you know, beyond one site. They would, you know, that he said it wasn't the right structure. We had several sites at that time, and he didn't think it was the right structure for us, and that's one of the reasons we didn't go for it. So there's so much to be said for concentrating on what you do and just doing it really, really well. I know this sounds hypocritical coming from me, but taking pleasure from doing something and pride from doing something really well, rather than, you know, forever wanting to get bigger. There speaks a man with, in the later stages of his life. But anyway, yeah.
Interestingly, in the chat, there is a little chat note from Mark Simmons saying that Suma, who are also a worker co-op, are just currently operating across 2 sites in Yorkshire and London. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes and how they deal with the governance challenges of that. Which, unless, Andy, do you want to comment on that last question, or should we move on to the decision making?
Well, I was just going to say that, you know, for small box schemes, there's a real opportunity to join up if they don't regionally, you know, if they're not all in the same patch, to actually join up some of the things, like, you know, putting recipes online. You know, that takes time out of a business to do that, and to do it well takes quite a skill. And it's very easy to point everyone at the Riverford website and go, here's how you use courgettes, because they're so good at putting up their veg hacks and everything. You know, those sorts of joining up things, rather than us all competing here at the bottom for 1.7% of the market. We've got to think about the 98.3% of the market that isn't organic at the moment in it, you know. And cooperate, little box schemes cooperating to buy together packaging, to buy fruit and veg together out of season, then even one of them growing the thing that the others don't want to grow, is surely a good way to go. It all takes time and it takes effort and it takes trust. Number one, they have to trust each other that they're going to get the service and that they're going to get paid for the packaging that maybe one of them bought on behalf of 3 of them. But that has to, you know, that's definitely one way of helping the box schemes grow and stay efficient and keep their prices where they should be. Yeah,
I mean, so just has been put up in the chat, which I was going to mention as well, is excitingly exactly what the Better Food traders are doing. So there is, we've got a box scheme up here as well, and we're part of the Better Food Traders Network, and so people do share recipes and are chatting about packaging and all that sort of thing. I mean, just apart, we will go on to the decision making in a minute, but there is another interesting question about focusing on local rather than national, and what you all think of that, in terms of should box schemes focus more on sourcing and supplying locally rather than nationally, and then an additional related, where are you at with the localization movement?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you can. The last bit of that question is the success of that a movement or a threat to your business? I think that is specifically
I don't the local thing, no, I absolutely welcome it, and I think, you know, for some people they're happy to accept the compromises that come with buying very locally, and it'll probably be fresher, it may sometimes taste better. it won't have been in a cold room for long. You know, lots of advantages to it, but you will not get the same sort of range and you won't get the same service. And, you know, so some people, that's fine, and other people, it's not. So, and, you know, environmentally, the argument for Uber Local is not very strong because the most of the energy is used in the last mile, and we all deliver in vehicles, and Riverford will probably be all electric before everyone else. So that's not a very strong argument, but I think there is a very strong kind of social argument for and cultural argument for being close to where your food is produced. And I absolutely support that. And you know, if I wind the clock back, this is probably back when Andy was there, so he'll remember me. I didn't want to run a big business. I never wanted to run a big business. I now run a 150-acre farm, and that's what I want to do. But I'm a kind of born entrepreneur. I can't seem to be able to help it. And it kept on growing and growing and growing. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just go and help other people to set up similar box schemes elsewhere, and maybe we'll share IT and marketing and whatever. And nobody wanted to. I was probably an arrogant young man at the time and deeply obnoxious, and no one wanted to join in other than equally horrible entrepreneurial people, and who just saw it as a profit opportunity. And anyway, we spent countless millions and years developing these local box schemes, and they didn't really work very well, is the truth of it. I mean, I'm probably choosing the right people to be working with. Maybe I was too impatient and so on, but we got up to 5 or 6 of them, and we're back down to 2 now. It just didn't, anyway, and managing it was a nightmare. You know, how to brand it and whatever, there was a lot of debate around that. And you know, we're back into running something much more localized, much more centralized, and which is never what I wanted to do. And I do feel somewhat compromised by it. I don't think I had the managers around me to be able to, I didn't articulate my vision. I didn't have the managers around me at the time who were able to implement that vision. And I will never know whether it was a good vision that was poorly implemented or whether it was just a bloody stupid idea in the first place. But I think, you know, just let us do our thing and let Abel and Cole do our thing and do your thing locally and be different. And I think there's plenty of room for everyone. And you know, the number of people that we have actually pinched from a local box scheme, we did actually do some research on this years ago, it's next to nothing. The people that we have that have previously had box schemes, they've given up because for some reason it didn't suit them. And then they've signed up for Riverford. It's much more common that it goes the other way, but actually people will go with Riverford a little bit and they, you know, they think, yeah, I buy into these values, but actually I want something more local, and they hear about a local box scheme, and that is a much more common journey. I would say 10 times more common.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to stop you on that point there. I am going to mention it.
Expensive, aren't I? That stopped me.
I'm stopping you there just because I'm going to go over to Dan and Andy, but I'm also going to mention, I don't know whether anyone's here from Growing Communities, because I know that they have also done some work around supporting other satellite box schemes. So I absolutely take what you're saying, that it didn't work for you, just saying that as a model that can work to support other box schemes.
As I say, I don't know whether it was the way we implemented it, or
but just to give people hope, as we're talking about how we're going to totally overthrow and revolutionise the mainstream system, it is also a model that can work elsewhere. And I'm going to hand over to either Dan or Andy. Do either of you want to comment on can you remember the question? The focus on sourcing and supplying locally rather than nationally, if you've got any additional comments on that, or we can move over to decision making.
The only thing I've got to say about it is how we try to encourage people to cycle to the shop. We really like the most damage we cause is through cars that travel to the shop, and we've installed many bike racks and lots of incentivization schemes, and it's changing, but it's ultimately most people, well, a lot of people still turn up in a Range Rover that's driven from quite far away, and there's not a lot you can do about it. And yeah, I think Guy's point is really interesting about the electric vehicles as well. I mean, we applaud all of our local suppliers, particularly ones within the kind of the Manchester Ring Road, but ultimately it's all still being delivered by big diesel trucks, and there's not much kind of getting around that. And as you know, wonderful as local supply is, certainly with Brexit and what happened when all of those measures were introduced. You know, the one thing that I never like to be without in my kitchen is lemons. And as much as we like, we're never going to have a UK supply of lemons. So, yeah, there's limits to it, certainly. And I think it would be such a drastic upheaval in the way that we eat if we were to look at really localising our food supply in that way.
Just to say, I've just been reminded that we've only got 5 minutes and we will have to stop at exactly 5. So I think, is there could I ask Dan, first of all, just to say a bit about decision making in Unicorn and how you do that with so many people?
Okay, very quickly. We adopt a system called sociocracy, which devolves decision making to the fewest number of people possible. So for any day-to-day kind of functions of the business that don't require everybody's input, we have these small groups who are elected to represent larger teams. And there's never more than 10 people, and we call them circles. And yeah, day-to-day boring decisions are devolved to those. Bigger decisions that impact us financially or something to do with the future, we have general meetings or members meetings, and they are quite long-winded and arduous to sit through, and they take a long time, but they are necessary. We try to avoid any decisions going to that unless they absolutely have to.
Okay, brilliant. Any Guy or Andy on decision making that's super quick, and then I'm going to ask you the last question for each of you.
As local as possible, involving as few people as possible is the secret to good decision making. We briefly looked at holacracy and social. I can't even say it, but anyway, it made my head explode. I just couldn't deal with it. Too many people in a room. Yeah. So
okay.
Anyway,
Andy.
Recognizing a lot of decisions actually make themselves. You just don't want to recognize that, and that's as you say, that it's devolving those where that, you know, that it wasn't a decision, it's just something that needed doing. Those are important things. Empowering people at the show, you know, your customers and the people who work for you, give people agency.
Brilliant. We've basically got 3 minutes left, and then we're going to just be shut down. So last quick question, which is, what do you think is the most important way that we as these ethical businesses can help move from the mainstream food system we have now to a more ethical one for everyone? And what are your thoughts on that in 1 minute each, please? And just to say, sorry, I didn't get to all your questions. There's hundreds of great questions. You can download the chat and ask other people. Discuss.
I would say whatever you do, make sure you do it really bloody well, and don't try and do too much, and thereby you will be successful, your customers will be happier, your suppliers will be happy, and you'll demonstrate that a better way of doing business is possible. Try and do too much, you'll do the opposite.
Okay, great. Andy?
Well, mostly what I'm thinking about at the moment is about policy making and getting to the local council. So Devon County Council now has a councillor responsible for food. That's a new change this year, and every council should have a member that's an elected representative responsible for food. That's amazing they don't. And that retail space in national change should be allowed. There should be some space through the HOs for local produce, and that includes McDonald's lettuce, and help smallholders get planning permission to live on if they've got a viable business, they should be able to live cheaply where they work. Those are important things for me.
Okay, Dan.
I would say focus on the positives, talk about all the ways that it has a really good impact, and try and shy away from cynicism and negativity.
Can I just say that I totally agree with Tim Dickens' comment that
what's Tim Dickens said?
Dickinson, is it? Anyway, anyway, how you define quality service, and in some ways, small box schemes can do better at that than us as well. But it's about how you.
Also, when we were chatting and planning this, we talked a lot about trust, which I think all of us at the time felt was massively important. So I just wanted to say that, and about just making sure that whatever you do, you're building trust with your customers and with your producers, really importantly, and that you absolutely value and treat your producers well. And I think that was really important to all of us. So I'm going to stop because we are going to have to be switched off right now. Thank you very much, all of you. Thanks for all of you speakers, and thanks to the volunteers who have been keeping us to time. And hopefully see you all in the real world in Oxford next year.
Brilliant. Drink to that.
Thank you. Bye.